Marcus Chen wiped his hands on his coveralls and checked his work tablet one more time. Bay 47, scheduled maintenance on a Terran cargo freighter. Simple job. Replace some worn power couplings, check the environmental systems, maybe grab lunch afterward. He'd done this routine 1,000 times at Kepler Station. The problem was that Kepler Station had grown too big for its own good. What started as a simple trading post had become a sprawling maze of docking bays, residential sectors, and commercial districts. Even after 3 years working here, Marcus still took wrong turns. He hefted his toolkit and headed toward what he thought was Bay 47. The corridor looked right. Same industrial gray walls, same flickering overhead lights that maintenance never seemed to fix. The bay door stood open, revealing a ship that definitely wasn't the rusty cargo hauler he expected. This vessel was sleek, almost organic-looking, with curves that reminded him of flowing water. The hull had an odd shimmer to it, like oil on water, shifting between deep purple and black. Definitely not human-built. Marcus pulled out his tablet and frowned. The work order clearly said Bay 47, and the sign above the door confirmed it. Maybe they'd switched ships without updating the system. Wouldn't be the first time station management screwed up paperwork. He shrugged and walked up the loading ramp. A job was a job, and alien tech paid better anyway. The airlock cycled him through, and he stepped into the ship's interior. The first thing that hit him was the scale. Everything was built for people much taller than humans. The corridor stretched up at least 12 feet, with elegant archways instead of the boxy passages he was used to. Soft blue light emanated from panels that looked grown rather than installed. "Hello?" he called out. "Station maintenance, here for the scheduled service." No answer. The ship felt empty, but powered up. He could hear the subtle hum of active systems, the whisper of air recyclers working. His scanner showed normal atmosphere, maybe a bit warmer than human standard, but nothing his suit couldn't handle. Marcus followed the main corridor deeper into the ship, looking for the engineering section. The layout was completely alien, but he'd worked on enough non-human vessels to recognize the general flow. Crew quarters forward, common areas in the middle, engineering aft. He passed what might have been a dining area, with furniture that looked more like abstract art than tables and chairs. Everything had that same flowing, organic design. The surfaces felt warm under his gloved touch, almost alive. A soft sound made him pause. It was low, almost musical, like someone humming a tune just below the edge of hearing. He followed it down a side passage that opened into what could only be the ship's bridge. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. 5 beings stood around a central command console, and they were the most beautiful and terrifying creatures he'd ever seen. Tall, easily 8 feet each, with graceful feminine forms covered in what looked like scales that shifted color as they moved. Their faces were elegant, but definitely not human, with large eyes that reflected the bridge lighting and features that suggested both nobility and danger. What really caught his attention were the wing-like membranes that extended from their backs. Not full wings, but the clear evolutionary remnant of them, and their hands ended in claws that looked like they could cut through steel. Dragon women. He'd heard stories about the Draknari, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. They moved with a fluid grace that made him think of predators, but predators who wrote poetry. One of them noticed him and hissed something in a language that sounded like wind chimes in a thunderstorm. The others turned, and suddenly Marcus found himself the center of attention from 5 pairs of reptilian eyes. He said, holding up his tablet. "Station maintenance? I'm here about the power coupling replacement." The tallest of the group, whose scales were a deep crimson with gold edges, stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice was accented but clear. "Human, how did you access our ship?" "The bay door was open," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Work order came in this morning. Bay 47, scheduled maintenance." He held out the tablet. hoping the universal translator would handle the rest. The crimson-scaled woman studied the tablet with expressions that he couldn't read. Her companions gathered around, speaking in rapid bursts of their musical language. Marcus caught enough tone to realize they were arguing about something. "I am Captain Zyra Volthareth," the Crimson One said finally. "This is the Starship Nethys Kalar. We requested no maintenance from your station." "Must be a computer error," Marcus said. "Happens all the time. I'll just head back and sort it out with dispatch." He started to back toward what he hoped was the exit. "Wait." Captain Zira's voice carried absolute authority. "You are a systems engineer?" "Maintenance tech," Marcus corrected. "I fix things that break." She exchanged looks with her crew. One of them, whose scales were silver blue, spoke urgently in their language. Captain Zira's expression changed to something Marcus couldn't interpret but definitely didn't like. "You will come with us," she decided. "We have need of your skills. Look, I appreciate the offer, but I've got other jobs lined up today. Maybe we could schedule something through proper channels?" The silver-blue one moved faster than Marcus would have thought possible. One moment she was across the bridge, the next she was beside him. One clawed hand resting gently but unmistakably on his shoulder. "You misunderstand," Captain Zira said, her tone polite but final. "This is not a request." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "You're kidnapping me?" "We prefer to think of it as emergency recruitment," said another crew member, this one with green-gold scales. Her voice carried a hint of amusement. "I am Engineer Kethva. Our ship has problems that require creative solutions." "What kind of problems?" Captain Zira gestured to the main display, which showed a star chart with their current position marked. "We are carrying urgent medical supplies to the Kaldar system. 3 worlds suffering from plague, over 40 million lives at stake. Our destination is 18 days away at maximum hyperdrive." "That doesn't sound too bad." "Our hyperdrive is failing," Kethva said grimly. "We have perhaps 3 days of operation left before complete breakdown. At sublight speeds, the journey would take 6 months. Marcus looked around the bridge again, taking in the alien technology with new eyes. "And you think I can fix it?" "Draknari engineering is highly advanced but also highly specialized," Captain Zira explained. "Our systems are grown rather than built, integrated at the molecular level. When they fail, they require intuitive solutions rather than technical ones." "Humans," added a crew member with pale yellow scales, "are known for unconventional thinking. Your species has a reputation for fixing things with whatever is available." "MacGyvering," Marcus muttered. "What?" "Nothing. Human cultural reference." He looked at the star chart again, thinking about 40 million people dying while he worried about his schedule. "Show me the drive." Captain Zyra nodded approvingly. "Navigator Shesra will escort you." The pale yellow one stepped forward with a bow. The engineering section was 3 decks down, and Marcus had to duck through most of the corridors. The Draknari moved through their ship like dancers, all flowing grace and unconscious elegance. He felt like a stumbling child by comparison. The hyperdrive chamber took his breath away. Instead of the mechanical assembly he expected, he found what looked like a massive crystal formation growing from the deck and bulkheads. It pulsed with internal light, and he could feel energy moving through it in patterns that made his teeth ache. "By the ancestors," Kethva breathed as they entered. "It's worse than yesterday." She was right. Even Marcus could see the problem. Parts of the crystal formation were dark, the light flickering and dying in spreading patches. It looked like some kind of crystalline cancer eating away at the drive core. "What caused this?" he asked, pulling out his scanner. "Unknown," Kethva replied. "The degradation began 6 days ago. We have tried every conventional repair technique, but the crystal matrix continues to deteriorate." Marcus ran his scanner over the dark sections, frowning at the readings. The crystal structure was definitely alien, but energy was energy. His device was reading massive instabilities in the containment field, harmonics that were tearing the matrix apart from the inside. This isn't mechanical failure, he realized. Someone sabotaged you. The Draknari exchanged sharp looks. Explain, Captain Zira ordered. Marcus pointed to his scanner readings. See this resonance pattern? These frequencies are specifically tuned to disrupt your crystal matrix. This kind of precise sabotage takes knowledge of Draknari engineering principles. The Syndicate, hissed Navigator Shesra. They wish to prevent the medical supplies from reaching Kaldar. Who's the Syndicate? Marcus asked. Criminals who profit from chaos, Captain Zira said grimly. If the plague worlds cannot pay for medicine, they will sell their children into slavery to survive. The Syndicate finances such desperation. Marcus felt a cold anger building in his chest. He'd heard about slavery in the outer systems, but it was easy to ignore when it was just statistics on a news feed. Standing here, looking at a weapon designed to kill 40 million people for profit, made it very real. Can you fix it? Kethva asked quietly. Marcus studied the readings again, his mind racing. The sabotage was elegant, using the drive's own power against it, but every weapon had a weakness if you understood how it worked. Maybe, he said slowly, but not with conventional repairs. We'd need to completely retune the resonance frequencies, essentially rebuild the harmonic matrix from scratch. That would require a master crystal singer, Navigator Shesra said. Such artisans train for decades to achieve the necessary skill. Or someone who thinks outside the box, Marcus muttered, staring at the dying crystal formation. An idea was forming. Crazy and probably impossible, but potentially brilliant. What are you thinking? Captain Zira asked. Marcus grinned. How much do you trust human engineering? Should I be concerned by that expression? Kethva asked. Probably. I need to see your machine shop. The Draknari engineering spaces were as organic as the rest of the ship, but they still had tools for working with conventional materials. Marcus found what he needed in the fabrication bay, a sonic resonator designed for precision crystal work. You intend to sing new frequencies into the drive core? Navigator Shesra sounded skeptical. Not exactly. Marcus was already pulling components from his toolkit. Your saboteur was clever, but they made one mistake. They assumed you'd try to fight the disruptive frequencies. He began connecting his portable signal generator to the ship's sonic resonator, jury-rigging interfaces that definitely weren't designed to work together. The Draknari watched with expressions that might have been fascination or horror. Instead of fighting the sabotage, Marcus continued, we're going to redirect it, turn the weapon into a tool. That is impossible, Kethva stated. The frequencies are specifically designed to destroy crystal matrices. Right. But what if we don't want to preserve the existing matrix? Marcus finished his connections and ran a quick diagnostic. What if we want to rebuild it completely? Captain Zira's eyes widened as she understood. You intend to use the sabotage frequencies to dissolve the damaged portions, then introduce new growth patterns. Exactly. Like using acid to remove rust, then applying new metal. Marcus hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. Of course, if I get the frequencies wrong, we'll probably turn your entire drive core into powder. The bridge fell silent except for the whisper of air recyclers. The medical supplies must reach Kaldar, Captain Zira said finally. 40 million lives outweigh the risk to 5. 6, Marcus corrected. I'm on this ship too. You could take an escape pod, Engineer Kethva pointed out. Return to the station safely. Marcus looked around the bridge at the 5 alien women who were willing to risk their lives for people they'd never met. The smart thing would be to take that escape pod. Go back to his simple, safe life, fixing broken air recyclers. Instead, he thought about 40 million people waiting for medicine that might never come. Let's save some lives, he said. The work took 6 hours. Marcus had to completely recalibrate the sonic resonator, create new frequency patterns that would dissolve damaged crystal without destroying healthy growth, then carefully introduce harmonic sequences that would encourage new matrix formation. The Draknari crew watched him work with growing amazement. His approach was completely unlike anything in their engineering tradition, combining intuitive leaps with brute force solutions that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. There, Marcus said finally, wiping sweat from his forehead, ready to test it. What exactly will happen? Captain Zyra asked. Either we'll restore your hyperdrive to full function, Marcus said, or we'll create a very large explosion. How large? Marcus considered this. Well, probably not large enough to damage the station. Probably. I'm an optimist. Captain Zyra looked at her crew, who nodded back one by one. Proceed. Marcus activated his improvised repair system. The sonic resonator came online with a deep thrumming that made the deck plates vibrate. Through the observation window, they watched the drive crystal begin to glow. The sabotage frequencies did their work first, dissolving the dark, corrupted sections in waves of brilliant light. For a moment, Marcus thought he'd miscalculated as more than half the crystal matrix simply vanished. Then the growth frequencies kicked in. New crystal began forming, spreading through the empty spaces with geometric precision. But instead of the random, organic patterns of the original, this new growth followed mathematical sequences that Marcus had built into his program. Magnificent, breathed Navigator Shesra. The efficiency is triple our original specifications. The new drive core stabilized at 340% of the ship's original rated capacity. What had been an 18-day journey to Kaldar was now a 5-day trip. Impossible, Engineer Kethva said, staring at her readings. No Draknari engineer could achieve such optimization. That's because no Draknari engineer would have torn out half the drive core and rebuilt it based on human mathematical principles, Marcus said. Sometimes the best solution is the one nobody expects. Captain Zyra studied him with her unreadable reptilian expression. You have saved 40 million lives today, human. This is a deed the Draknari do not forget. Just doing my job, Marcus said, though he felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Now, about getting back to the station. Ah, Captain Zyra said. About that. Something in her tone made Marcus nervous. Problem? The Syndicate will not give up easily, she explained. They have agents throughout this sector. If they learn that their sabotage was defeated by a single human engineer, they will target you for elimination. So I should lay low for a while. Got it. More than that, Engineer Kethva said. They will also attempt to capture you, to learn your techniques. Imagine what they could do if they understood human engineering principles. Marcus hadn't thought of that. His jury-rigged solutions could be turned into incredibly sophisticated sabotage tools in the wrong hands. What are you suggesting? That you remain aboard Nethys Kalar until the situation resolves, Captain Zyra said smoothly. For your own protection, of course. For how long? The dragon women exchanged glances. That remains to be seen. Marcus looked around the alien bridge at the beings who had just saved 40 million lives and were now trying to save his. He thought about his apartment back on the station, his routine maintenance job, his simple, safe, utterly predictable life. Then he looked at the star chart showing their route to Kaldar, to worlds where plague victims waited for medicine that would now arrive in time to save them. Well, he said finally, I suppose I could take some vacation days. The Draknari crew relaxed visibly, and Marcus realized he'd just passed some kind of test. But as the ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, he wondered exactly what he'd gotten himself into. The hyperdrive engaged with a harmonic song that was nothing like the mechanical thrumming of human FTL drives. Through the viewports, stars shifted into rainbow streams as they accelerated toward Kaldar. Marcus Chen, maintenance engineer from Kepler Station, was about to discover that sometimes the universe had bigger plans than fixing broken air recyclers. The Kaldar system appeared on the main display 4 days ahead of schedule, 3 suns orbiting each other in an intricate cosmic dance. Marcus had spent the journey learning about Draknari culture and trying not to think about how he was technically a kidnapping victim who was enjoying himself way too much. His quarters were huge by human standards, with furniture that adjusted to his size after some trial and error. The food dispenser had been reprogrammed to provide human-compatible meals, though some of the flavors were unlike anything he'd tasted. The Draknari treated him with a mixture of respect and curiosity that was oddly flattering. 3 worlds, Captain Zira announced as they dropped out of hyperspace. Kaldar Prime, with a population of 15 million. Kaldar Beta, 8 million. And Kaldar Gamma, the worst affected at 17 million. The plague had hit the system 6 months ago, an engineered bioweapon that targeted the genetic markers common to all 3 worlds' populations. The Syndicate's calling card, create a crisis, then profit from the desperation it caused. Medical supplies will be distributed simultaneously to all 3 worlds, Navigator Shesra reported. Transport ships are standing by. Marcus watched the coordination from his station on the bridge. The Draknari had given him an observer role, though he suspected they were hoping he'd spot problems they might miss. It was the kind of complex logistics operation that could go wrong in 1,000 different ways. And of course, it did. Captain, Engineer Kethva called from her console, voice tight with tension. I'm detecting weapon signatures in the outer system. Multiple contacts, moving to intercept. The main display shifted to tactical mode, showing red dots converging on their position from 3 directions. Marcus counted at least 12 ships, all of them significantly larger than Nethys Kalar. Syndicate fleet, Captain Zira said grimly. They must have been waiting in the system, cloaked until we arrived. Can we outrun them? Marcus asked. Not while protecting the medical transports, Navigator Shesra replied. Their ships are unarmed civilians. Marcus looked at the tactical display with growing alarm. The Syndicate ships were forming a classic encirclement pattern, designed to prevent escape while concentrating firepower. Even if Nethys Kalar could fight its way out, the medical ships would be sitting ducks. What's our combat capability? He asked. Limited, Captain Zira admitted. We are not a warship. Defensive shields, basic weapons systems, nothing compared to dedicated military vessels. So we're outnumbered 12-1 by ships designed to kill us, and we can't run because we have to protect civilians. Marcus rubbed his forehead. This is where I point out that I'm a maintenance engineer, not a tactical genius. Your species has a reputation for finding solutions others cannot see, said the crew member he'd come to know as Pilot Vexara. Her scales were a deep blue-black that reminded him of deep ocean water. Perhaps you can see something we cannot. Marcus studied the tactical display, his mind racing through possibilities. 12 enemy ships, each one larger and better armed than their own. The mathematics of the situation were simple and depressing. What kind of cargo are the medical transports carrying? He asked suddenly. Antiviral medications, medical equipment, surgical supplies, Engineer Kethva recited. Nothing that could be weaponized. What about the containers, the actual transport ships? Captain Zira looked puzzled. Standard civilian freighters, minimal shielding, basic propulsion systems. An idea began forming in Marcus's mind, the kind of crazy notion that would never occur to someone trained in conventional tactics. How many transport ships total? 37, Navigator Shesra answered. And they're all automated? Yes. Why do you ask? Marcus grinned, the kind of grin that made Captain Zira's claws extend involuntarily. Because I just figured out how to turn a medical convoy into a weapons platform. The Syndicate fleet was expecting a standard engagement. Find the enemy ships, destroy the escorts, capture or destroy the cargo, depending on what would be more profitable. They had overwhelming firepower advantage and numerical superiority. It should have been a simple operation. What they weren't expecting was for the medical transports to suddenly change course and accelerate directly toward them. "What are those fools doing?" demanded Captain Voss from the bridge of the Syndicate dreadnought. "They're flying straight into our weapons range." "No energy signatures," his sensor operator reported. "No weapons, no shields, they're defenseless." "Then why are they attacking us?" The first transport ship reached the Syndicate formation and exploded in a brilliant fireball. But instead of the small pop of a destroyed freighter, the explosion expanded outward in a carefully calculated pattern that caught 3 enemy vessels in its radius. "What in the 9 hells was that?" Captain Voss shouted. His question was answered when the second transport ship detonated, then the third. Each explosion was precisely timed and positioned to catch multiple enemy ships in overlapping blast radii. "They're using their own ships as guided missiles," the tactical officer realized. "But the explosions are too large. Those ships can't be carrying enough explosive to—" The fourth transport exploded, taking 2 more Syndicate vessels with it, and the tactical officer finally understood what he was seeing. "They've turned the medical supplies into bombs," he breathed, mixing reactive chemicals to create massive explosions. On Nethys Kalar's bridge, Marcus watched his improvised weapons do their work with grim satisfaction. "Chemical explosive theory," he explained to the fascinated Draknari crew. "Mix the right medical compounds, and you get reactions that release incredible amounts of energy." "You turned medicine into weapons," Engineer Kethva said with something approaching awe. "Only a human would think of such a thing." "Only a human would be desperate enough to try it," Marcus corrected. He was remotely piloting the transport ships using hastily jury-rigged control systems, sending each one on a collision course with enemy vessels. The Syndicate's biggest advantage is also their weakness. They rely on overwhelming force, so they cluster their ships together for maximum firepower concentration. Another transport ship found its target, detonating in the middle of a 3-ship formation. The Syndicate was trying to spread out now, but it was too late. Marcus had already calculated optimal approach vectors for the remaining ships. "Impressive," Captain Zira observed, "but you have destroyed half our medical supplies." "Better than losing all of them," Marcus replied, sending another transport on its final mission. "Besides, we still have enough medicine for the most critical cases, and the Syndicate won't be back anytime soon." The battle was over in 15 minutes. The Syndicate fleet, caught completely off guard by an attack method that violated every rule of civilized warfare, lost 8 ships and fled the system in disorder. The medical convoy continued on schedule, minus the ships that had been converted to explosives. Captain Zira studied the tactical display with an expression Marcus had learned to recognize as deep thought. "Your solution saved millions of lives and preserved most of the medical supplies, but it required sacrificing ships and resources to do so." "Sometimes that's the only choice," Marcus said quietly. "In human military history, we call it acceptable losses." "Acceptable to whom?" Marcus looked at the display showing the 3 plague-ridden worlds below. "To the people who get to live because we made hard decisions." The medical supplies were distributed over the next 2 days. Marcus watched from orbit as transport shuttles carried hope down to dying worlds, knowing that his improvised weapons had made the difference between salvation and catastrophe. But as they prepared to leave the Kaldar system, a new problem emerged. "Captain," Navigator Shesra reported from her station, "we're receiving a priority communication from the Draknari High Command." Captain Zira's scales shifted to darker hues, which Marcus had learned was a sign of stress. On screen, the main display showed an elderly Draknari female whose scales were pure white with age. Her eyes held the kind of authority that came from centuries of command. "Captain Volthareth," the figure said formally. "I am Admiral Zeth Sara of the High Command. We have received reports of your recent actions in the Kaldar system." "Yes, Admiral. The medical supplies were successfully delivered despite Syndicate interference. Using a human engineer who converted civilian medical transports into explosive devices," Admiral Zeth Sara noted. "This human who achieved a 340% improvement in your hyperdrive efficiency." Marcus felt all eyes on the bridge turned toward him. This didn't sound like the kind of attention he wanted from high-ranking military officers. "Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation," the Admiral continued, looking directly at him through the display. "Your actions have attracted considerable attention. The High Command wishes to interview you." "Interview me about what?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "About the military applications of human engineering principles," Admiral Zeth Sara replied. "Your solutions to both the hyperdrive sabotage and the Syndicate fleet demonstrate tactical thinking that is unique." Captain Zira stepped forward. "Admiral, Marcus Chen is under our protection. He cannot be compelled to—" "Captain," the Admiral interrupted mildly, "I am not compelling anything. I am making a request. Mr. Chen, would you be willing to visit our primary research facility to discuss your methodologies?" Marcus looked around the bridge at the 5 Draknari who had become something between captors and friends over the past week. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Share knowledge that could save lives," Admiral Zeth Sara said simply. "The Syndicate is not the only threat in this region of space. Pirates, slavers, hostile species that view mercy as weakness, all of them could be countered more effectively with human tactical innovations. You want to turn maintenance engineering into military science. We want to learn how to think like humans when conventional solutions fail." The Admiral's expression was unreadable. "Your species has a gift for finding unconventional answers to impossible problems. That gift could make the difference between peace and chaos in this sector." Marcus thought about the Syndicate ships, about 40 million plague victims, about all the problems in the galaxy that couldn't be solved with conventional thinking. Then he thought about his simple life back on Kepler Station, fixing broken air recyclers and going home to his empty apartment every night. "How long would this interview take?" he asked. "That depends entirely on how much you're willing to share," Admiral Zeth Sara replied. "And how much you choose to learn in return." Captain Zira moved closer to him. "Marcus, you are not obligated to accept. We can protect you from any pressure the High Command might apply." "Can you?" Marcus asked quietly. "Can any of us really stand against the entire Draknari military if they decide I'm too valuable to let go?" The bridge fell silent. Through the viewport, the stars of the Kaldar system glittered like distant promises, each one representing countless worlds with their own problems and crises. "I need time to think," Marcus said finally. Admiral Zeth Sara nodded. "Of course, Captain Volthareth, you are ordered to remain in the Kaldar system until Mr. Chen reaches his decision. Do not attempt to leave without authorization." The communication ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. "Well," Marcus said after a moment, "I guess we're not going anywhere soon." "Marcus," Engineer Kethva said hesitantly, "what will you choose?" Marcus looked at each of them in turn. Zira with her crimson and gold scales, Kethva in green gold, Navigator Shesra in pale yellow, Pilot Vexara in deep blue-black, and Communications Officer Thessa in silver blue. A week ago, they'd been complete aliens. Now they felt like the closest thing to friends he'd had in years. "I'll choose what I always choose," he said, "whatever keeps people alive." But as he said it, Marcus realized the universe had gotten much more complicated than fixing broken hyperdrives and fighting off pirates. The Draknari High Command wanted to learn human tactical thinking, and that knowledge could change the balance of power in the entire sector. The question was, whether that change would save lives or cost them. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the decisions of humans and dragons. But somewhere among those stars, other crises were brewing, other impossible problems were waiting for unconventional solutions. Marcus Chen had wanted a simple life. Instead, he was about to discover that the universe had much bigger plans for him than he'd ever imagined. And the 5 dragon women who'd accidentally recruited him were beginning to realize they might have caught something much more dangerous than a maintenance engineer. They'd caught a human who could think his way out of anything. In a galaxy full of problems that made him either the most valuable asset alive or the most dangerous weapon ever created, the choice of which one he became was still his to make. For now. Marcus spent 3 days thinking while Nethys Kalar remained in forced orbit around Kaldar Prime. The medical distribution was complete, and reports from the surface confirmed that his improvised battle had saved countless lives. But the knowledge that the Draknari High Command could simply order him detained indefinitely sat in his stomach like cold metal. On the morning of the 4th day, Captain Zira found him in the ship's observation lounge, staring out at the stars. "You have reached a decision," she said. It wasn't a question. The Draknari seemed to read human body language better than most humans did. "I have," Marcus confirmed. "But first I need to ask you something. When this all started, you said I was under your protection. Did you mean that?" Captain Zira's scales shifted to deeper crimson, a sign Marcus had learned indicated strong emotion. "The crew of Nethys Kalar protects its own. You saved 40 million lives and proved yourself worthy of our respect. Yes, human Marcus Chen, you are under our protection." "Even against your own military?" "Especially against our own military." Her claws extended slightly, an unconscious gesture of readiness for conflict. "The High Command sees you as a resource to be exploited. We see you as family." Marcus felt something warm and unexpected settle in his chest. Family. When was the last time anyone had used that word about him? "In that case," he said, "I've decided to meet with Admiral Zeth Sara, but on my terms." Captain Zira's eyes widened. "Explain." "I'll share what I know about human engineering and tactical thinking, but only if the High Command agrees to 3 conditions. Marcus held up his fingers as he counted. "First, any knowledge I share can only be used for defensive purposes. Protecting shipping, fighting pirates and slavers, defending colonies, never for conquest or aggression." "That is reasonable," Captain Zira said cautiously. "The second condition? I remain a member of this crew. Permanently. No reassignments, no transfers, no temporary consulting positions that turn into indefinite detention. Nethys Kalar is my ship, and these quarters are my home." Captain Zira's expression shifted to something Marcus couldn't quite read. "And the third condition?" Marcus grinned. "We get to keep all the modifications I make to this ship. I've got some ideas about improving your weapons systems that the High Command is going to love." 2 hours later, they were in direct communication with Admiral Zeth Sara on the Draknari homeworld. Marcus had insisted the entire crew be present for the negotiations, partly for moral support and partly because he suspected he'd need witnesses. "Mr. Chen," the Admiral said formally, "Captain Volthareth has transmitted your conditions. They are unprecedented." "So are the services I'm offering," Marcus replied. "You want to learn human tactical thinking? This is how humans negotiate. We don't just hand over valuable assets without getting something in return." Admiral Zeth Sara's white scales seemed to shimmer with what might have been amusement. "You consider yourself a valuable asset?" "I consider myself the only human in this sector who's proven capable of solving problems your best engineers couldn't handle," Marcus said bluntly. "The question is whether you consider 40 million saved lives and a 340% improvement in hyperdrive efficiency to be worth honoring 3 simple conditions." The admiral was quiet for a long moment, presumably consulting with other high command officers. When she spoke again, her tone had changed to something approaching respect. "Your first two conditions are acceptable," she said. "The third requires clarification. What modifications do you propose?" Marcus had been hoping for this question. He activated the holographic display he'd prepared, showing technical schematics that made the Draknari crew lean forward with interest. "Current Draknari weapons are based on focused energy projection," he began. "Very elegant, very efficient, but limited by power generation and targeting systems. Human weapons philosophy is different. We prefer multiple redundant systems and adaptable munitions." The display showed his proposed modifications to Nethys Kalar's weapon systems. Instead of the single primary energy cannon, he'd designed multiple smaller weapons that could operate independently or in concert. Each weapon pod can fire energy beams, physical projectiles, or hybrid munitions depending on the tactical situation, Marcus explained. The targeting system uses human predictive algorithms that account for enemy psychology as well as physics. "Fascinating," Admiral Zethsara murmured. "But this would require extensive modifications to your ship's power distribution system." "Already worked out," Marcus said, switching to his hyperdrive improvements. "The efficiency gains from my drive modifications free up 60% more power for weapon systems. Plus, I've designed modular components that can be manufactured using existing Draknari industrial capabilities." Engineer Kethva was studying the schematics with the intensity of a predator examining prey. "These hybrid munitions," she said, "they adapt their payload based on target analysis?" "Smart weapons," Marcus confirmed. "Armor-piercing for military targets, electromagnetic pulse for electronics, chemical dispersal for area denial. All from the same launch tube." "Impossible," Navigator Shesra breathed. "Human engineering," Marcus corrected. "We build things that shouldn't work, but somehow do." Admiral Zethsara was silent for several minutes, clearly communicating with other high command officers off-screen. When she returned her attention to the meeting, Marcus could see the decision in her ancient eyes. "Your conditions are accepted," she said formally. "You will remain permanently assigned to the crew of Nethys Kalar under Captain Volthareth's command. All modifications to your vessel are yours to keep and improve. And your knowledge sharing will be restricted to defensive applications only." "Then we have an agreement," Marcus said. "Indeed we do. Captain Volthareth, you are hereby assigned to special operations under direct high command authority. Your first mission will be to test Mr. Chen's modifications in actual combat conditions." Captain Zira's scales shifted to alert patterns. "What kind of combat conditions, Admiral?" "The Vorthon Rebellion has taken control of 3 systems in the Outer Spiral," Admiral Zethsara explained. "They're using stolen Draknari warships to attack civilian shipping and hold entire worlds hostage. Conventional tactics have failed to dislodge them." Marcus studied the tactical data as it appeared on screen. The Vorthon were a militaristic species known for their aggressive tactics and willingness to use civilian casualties as leverage. They'd seized a strategic junction of shipping routes and were demanding tribute from all passing vessels. "What's the mission?" he asked. "End the rebellion," Admiral Zethsara said simply. "Rescue the hostage populations, destroy the stolen fleet, restore order to the region." "How many ships do they have?" 23 captured Draknari vessels, including 2 dreadnoughts, plus an unknown number of their own construction." Marcus looked around at his crew, because that's what they were now, his crew. His family, 5 dragon women and 1 human engineer against 23 warships and an entire rebellion. "Any backup?" he asked hopefully. "Nethys Kalar operates alone," Captain Zira said with fierce pride. "We have always been sufficient." "We've never fought an entire fleet before," Pilot Vexara pointed out. "We've never had human tactical thinking before," Communications Officer Thessa added. Marcus studied the enemy positions again, his mind already racing through possibilities. Conventional tactics would require a fleet of Draknari dreadnoughts to defeat 23 warships, but human tactics weren't about fair fights. "How long do I have to prepare?" he asked. "Your modifications will require 2 weeks to implement," Admiral Zeth Sarah replied. "The rebellion can wait that long. Then we'd better get started." The next 2 weeks were the most intense of Marcus's life. Working with engineer Kethva, he completely redesigned Nethys Kalar's weapons and power systems. The graceful curves of the ship now concealed missile launchers, energy projectors, and weapon systems that could adapt to any tactical situation. But the real changes were deeper than hardware. Marcus had been teaching the crew human tactical thinking, the art of using weakness as strength, turning enemy advantages against them, finding solutions that no rational military planner would consider. "The key to fighting superior numbers," he explained during one planning session, "is to make sure you're never actually outnumbered when it matters." "How do we achieve this?" Navigator Shesra asked. "The mathematics are unavoidable." "By changing the mathematics," Marcus replied, bringing up holographic star charts. "The Vorthan fleet is spread across 3 systems, trying to control all the shipping lanes simultaneously. That means they can't concentrate their forces without abandoning their strategic positions. But if we attack one system, the others will reinforce it," Pilot Vexara observed. "Not if they can't," Marcus said with his trademark grin. "What if their reinforcements were busy dealing with problems in their own systems?" Captain Zyra leaned forward with interest. "What kind of problems?" "The kind that human engineers are very good at creating." The plan Marcus developed was elegant in its complexity. Instead of attacking the Vorthan fleet directly, they would infiltrate each system and sabotage critical infrastructure. Not enough to cause civilian casualties, but enough to create chaos that would force the rebels to split their attention. "Asteroid mining platforms," he explained, highlighting targets on the tactical display. "If their navigational systems fail, the platforms drift into shipping lanes. The rebels have to use ships to guide them to safety, or watch their entire economic base collapse." "Communications relays," Engineer Kethva added, understanding the strategy, "disrupt their coordination between systems." "And power distribution satellites," Communications Officer Thessa said excitedly, "make their planet-based defenses unreliable." "Exactly. We turn their greatest strength, controlling multiple systems, into their greatest weakness. They can't coordinate an effective response if they don't know what's happening where." The first system fell in 6 hours. Nethys Kalar slipped past the outer patrols using Marcus's modifications to their stealth systems, planted sabotage devices throughout the infrastructure, then disappeared before the Vorthan could respond. By the time the rebels realized what was happening, half their fleet was dealing with emergencies scattered across a dozen worlds. The second system was more challenging. The Vorthan had learned from the first attack and deployed their ships in defensive patterns around critical targets, but Marcus had anticipated this. "They're thinking like traditional military commanders," he observed as they watched enemy patrol routes. "Protecting assets, maintaining formations, following doctrine." "How is this a disadvantage?" Captain Zira asked. "Because I'm not thinking like a military commander," Marcus replied. "I'm thinking like a maintenance engineer who's really annoyed." Instead of attacking the protected targets, Marcus had them sabotage systems the Vorthan didn't think were important. Waste recycling stations, atmospheric processors, water purification plants, the boring infrastructure that kept worlds livable but didn't seem militarily significant. The effect was psychological as much as tactical. As civilian populations began experiencing shortages and environmental problems, pressure mounted on the Vorthan leadership to end their rebellion. When your children are breathing recycled air that smells wrong and drinking water that tastes like metal, military glory becomes less appealing. The third system was where the real battle happened. The Vorthon commander, a species known for their aggressive honor culture, had pulled his remaining fleet into a defensive formation around the system's capital world. 15 warships, including the 2 captured dreadnoughts, arranged in a perfect sphere that could concentrate fire on any approaching enemy. Classic Vorthon tactics, Captain Zira observed. Honor through strength, victory through superior firepower. Also classic stupidity, Marcus muttered, studying their formation. They've created a perfect target for the right kind of weapon. What weapon could penetrate that formation? Navigator Shesra asked. Those dreadnoughts have more firepower than 20 ships our size. Marcus activated his newest modification to the ship's weapons systems. One that doesn't need to penetrate it. The weapon Marcus had built looked deceptively simple. A single missile that launched from Nethys Kalar's main bay. But as it approached the Vorthon formation, it began to separate into smaller components, each one following a different trajectory. Cluster munitions, he explained as they watched the missile multiply. Each submunition contains a different payload. Some are kinetic penetrators, some are electromagnetic pulse devices, some are chemical dispersal units. But how can such small weapons damage dreadnoughts? Engineer Kethva asked. They can't, Marcus admitted, but they can disable sensors, disrupt communications, and create massive clouds of metallic chaff that blind targeting systems. The Vorthon fleet fired everything they had at the incoming missiles, destroying most of them. But enough got through to create chaos throughout their formation. Suddenly, 15 warships that had been operating as a coordinated unit were flying blind, unable to communicate, targeting shadows on their sensors. That's when Marcus launched the real attack. Now, he ordered quietly. Nethys Kalar dropped stealth and opened fire with every weapon system they had. But instead of trying to destroy the enemy ships, Marcus targeted their engine systems with surgical precision. One by one, the Vorthon vessels found themselves unable to maneuver, drifting in space like sitting ducks. "Surrender now," Captain Zira broadcast on all channels, "and your crews will be treated honorably. Continue fighting and we will disable your life support systems one by one." It was psychological warfare at its finest. The Vorthon could still fight, but they couldn't move, couldn't coordinate, couldn't see their enemy clearly. They were reduced to firing randomly into space, hoping to hit something. The rebellion ended when the Vorthon fleet commander realized he was fighting an enemy who could disable his entire fleet without destroying it. Such precision and restraint was alien to Vorthon military thinking, but it was undeniably effective. 15 warships surrendered without a single casualty on either side. Later, as they watched captured Vorthon vessels being escorted to internment facilities, Captain Zira found Marcus in the observation lounge again. "You have taught us something important," she said. "Victory need not require destruction." "Human philosophy," Marcus replied. "Sometimes the best way to win is to give your enemy no choice but to surrender." "The High Command will be impressed. Admiral Zeth Sarah spoke of additional missions, consulting with other fleet captains." Marcus nodded absently, watching the stars. "About that, I've been thinking." "Oh no," Engineer Kethva said from the doorway, where she'd been eavesdropping. "That tone of voice means trouble." "Not trouble," Marcus corrected. "Opportunity. The High Command wants to learn human tactical thinking, right? Well, I think we can do better than just sharing knowledge." "Explain," Captain Zira said, though her expression suggested she was already worried about what he might propose. "Instead of teaching theory, we demonstrate practice. Nethys Kalar becomes a training ship for Draknari officers who want to learn unconventional tactics, real missions, real problems, real solutions." "You want to turn our ship into a mobile academy?" Navigator Shesra said as she joined the group. "I want to create the most effective problem-solving team in the galaxy," Marcus corrected. Draknari precision and human improvisation, working together to handle the missions no one else can complete. Captain Zira studied him with her unreadable expression. This would mean permanent assignment to special operations, high-risk missions, impossible objectives, constant danger. It would also mean we get to save lives and solve problems together, Marcus pointed out, which is what we've been doing anyway. The crew would have to vote, Pilot Vexera said as she arrived with Communications Officer Thessa. It would affect all of us. Marcus looked around at the 5 dragon women who had become his family, his crew, his home among the stars. All in favor of turning Nethys Kalar into the galaxy's premier problem-solving vessel? 5 clawed hands rose immediately. Unanimous decision, Captain Zira said with satisfaction. Communications Officer Thessa, send a message to Admiral Zeth Sara. Inform the High Command that we are volunteering for extended special operations assignment. What should I tell them about our new mission parameters? Thessa asked. Marcus grinned as he looked out at the stars, thinking about all the problems waiting to be solved, all the crises that would need unconventional solutions, all the impossible situations that were about to become routine. Tell them we specialize in making the impossible look easy, he said, and that we're just getting started. 3 months later, Marcus Chen realized he hadn't thought about his old life on Kepler Station in weeks. His apartment, his routine maintenance jobs, his predictable and solitary existence, all of it seemed like a dream he'd once had about being someone else. Instead, he woke up each morning in quarters aboard the most advanced ship in the Draknari fleet, surrounded by 5 brilliant, deadly, and fiercely loyal friends who trusted him to solve problems that would stump entire military academies. This morning's problem involved rescuing a diplomatic delegation from a space station controlled by pirates, using nothing but mining equipment and a cargo hold full of agricultural supplies. Marcus smiled as he headed to the bridge. Just another Tuesday in his new life. The dragon women had been right about one thing. They really weren't going to let him leave. But as he looked around at his crew, his family, his home among the stars, Marcus realized he wouldn't have it any other way. Sometimes the universe knew exactly what it was doing when it put people in the wrong place at the right time. And sometimes, getting kidnapped by dragon women was the best thing that could happen to a maintenance engineer from Kepler Station. The stars beckoned with endless possibilities, and Marcus Chen was exactly where he belonged.